BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for the Farming Today podcast. I'm Kaz Graham, and in this episode, we'll be out with the Peak District women supporting each other through the stresses of farming life. And catastrophic. That's how a new report into the mass die-off of shellfish in the northeast of England describes its impact on fishing communities. First, though, how would you pick up a live chicken if ever the need arose? Well, for poultry farmers, the answer is often by getting hold of both of its legs as sanctioned by DEFRA guidance. But under a 2005 EU directive that then passed into UK law, picking up animals by their legs had been theoretically banned, although poultry farmers in both the EU and here have been allowed to do so because, according to industry representatives, this law was never intended to apply to poultry. Well, tomorrow, new rules come into effect that officially allow farmers to pick up hens and turkeys by both legs when catching them, as long as they're under a certain weight. Some campaign groups argue that the practice is cruel and causes pain, injuries and distress, and that there are more humane ways. I asked Richard Griffiths, Chief Executive of the British Poultry Council, if that is the case.
It's the accepted way to do it. It's not a welfare concern. It's done by people who are fully trained in the care of birds. So it's all a controlled process.
And it isn't distressing for them. I mean, some people would say, well, it sounds fairly distressing. And how do you know that it doesn't distress them?
There are various measures, scientific measures of stress. Catching can be a stressful process for the birds. And part of our responsibility is to minimise that stress, whether that's the birds waiting to be caught, already caught, or in the process of being caught. So this is scientific basis backed by veterinary supervision, because they're the valuable asset in all of this. There's no reason to do anything negative in this space. We have to get the birds as healthy and as high welfare as possible.
So what difference will the change in the law actually make if poultry farmers all already pick up birds like this?
It's really closing a legislative gap. There was a discrepancy there, so now the UK has taken the step forward of putting the catching not just in guidance but in legislation. Well, looking beyond this immediate piece of legislation, the industry's got long-term plans for catching, and a big part of that is adopting technology and moving to mechanical catching. So there are moves afoot to really secure the long-term both welfare of birds and the viability of the businesses. This is a priority, and we're taking it very seriously.
The campaign group, the ALF, the Animal Law Foundation, has been allowed to take out a judicial review of DEFRA's previous policy that the UK codes of practice, i.e. allowing the picking up of poultry by its back legs, they reckon that people shouldn't have been doing it anyway. What do you make of that?
Well, the legal challenge going on and still going on is about the discrepancy in the legislation. And now that gap has been or will be closed very shortly, we'll see what the courts make of their challenge.
That's Richard Griffiths. It's been estimated that around a third of people involved in farming in the UK could be suffering from some form of depression, with women in particular reporting high levels of anxiety. That's from a 2021 study by the University of Exeter and RABI, the Royal Agricultural Benevolent Institution. Throughout this week, we're going to be looking into health, mental health and well-being in rural Britain. And to kick us off, Bob Walker has been to the Peak District to meet a group of women farmers who've set up their own support group.
7 seconds left. We have to be kind to James. He's judging this year's English National, so we try and be kind to him.
My name is Rachel Metcalf and I'm the charity manager for the Farming Life Centre.
Following that will be our brace runner, which I believe...
Farming Life is a charity to support farmers and rural communities across the Peak District with mental health, business, grant finding, diversification, various projects from children all the way up to retired farmers.
Next to run is Darren Tillotson with Ziggy, and
So today we are at Bamford Sheepdog Trials. We get out and about throughout the summer at various shows. We're here to share information about our charity, whether that's grants, new groups that we've got going on, and try and encourage more farmers and members of the community to come and find the support that they need.
I'll just remind everybody here, this is a plain field.
So clearly you've identified that there is a need to address mental health issues in rural farming communities.
Farmers are really struggling financially and mentally. They need somewhere where they can go and look for that support. Over a year ago we set up the Peak Women in Ag, which is bringing women together who work on farms, live on farms, connected to farming in some way or just have an interest, and it's an opportunity for them to come together once a month to leave everything behind and enjoy some time talking, sharing problems or just having some fun, which is what we do. And we know that this is needed because we have around 100 women. Some of our meetings, they've sort of averaged between 50 and 100, which I think really tells us something about what's going on out there.
My name is Georgie Hodgson and I'm fourth generation farming in the Hope Valley. I'm involved with the Women in Agriculture, which is part of the Farming Life Centre.
What sort of issues are you coming up against within your group?
There's a lot of people who are very depressed, mainly about the fact that they're constantly working. It's just a bottomless pit. They're working and not getting anything out of it. Farming is very definitely a way of life, and because things are being made so difficult at the moment, it's going to remove that lifestyle. There's a lot of pressure on women, and women are better at talking. The group that we have every month does a fantastic job at opening up and releasing that stress. You can talk about things, and also we have fun. We can switch off from the pressures that we've got at home for an hour or so.
That's Georgie Hodgson from Peak Women in Ag. Now, you may remember we reported on the unexplained mass deaths of thousands of shellfish along a huge swathe of the northeast coast of England back in 2021. Lobsters and crabs were washing up dead, and some who made their living from fishing were forced to leave the industry as a result. This was fisherman Adrian Noble.
I have 1,100 crab pots, 22 fleets of 50 at the moment, but for the last 3 weeks it's nothing alive in the crab pots. It's very, very worrying. All the crabs are washing up dead, the lobsters are washing up dead, and it's a disaster.
That's Adrian Noble. Well, a new report into the incident from councillors right across the affected region say it's had a catastrophic impact on the industry and the mental well-being of those involved. And it's called for financial support, both for the fishermen and women affected and to help marine ecosystems recover. At the time of the mass die-off, Joe Redfern was fishing for lobster out of Whitby.
There was just devastation, really. It was just seeing lots of dead, twitching crustaceans in the pots on the beaches, pictures of these mounds and mounds of crabs and lobsters laying dead on the sand. And, the impact that had to the livelihoods of the fishing communities along the coastline was, devastating. It was really tough. And I think one of the hardest parts was knowing whether that was it forever or whether it was going to bounce back.
I know that one of the findings of this report was that it really affected many people's mental health. Can I ask, how did it affect your mental health at the time?
It was such a sort of all-encompassing event, that it ripped through our communities, really. And, I think the way I dealt with it was to get active and to try and understand and trying to get something done about it. And I think that's sort of sent me into a flurry of a couple of years of work, of organising and trying to get research done and make sure it's not going to happen again, so we could understand it, what happened there and then. It was a real stressful time dealing with government agencies, fishing communities. I was working as a deckhand on a small fishing boat. Some of these guys that are impacted they run through their generations, family generations as fishermen. I'm not one of those, but they have loans out on their boats, for example, or on the fishing gear, or, and debts and mortgages and everything else to pay off, and kids to look after, and so the toll of the stress was certainly felt throughout the fishing community. I think one of the sort of factors that made that even worse was when we turned to the people we felt were there to support us through this, or to give us some answers and to provide financial support if needed, those answers and that support didn't come, and we felt really, I think, at it alone as a coastal community when that happened.
How are things looking now? How are numbers of shellfish recovering?
Yeah, it varies really. The closer you get to the Tees estuary and the source of chemical pollution, the worse the impact is. So in Whitby, where I live, and a little bit further afield, as you go further away from the Tees estuary, the impact's less. But the closer you get to the estuary, the greater the impact is. So the fishing communities around Hartlepool have been dramatically impacted, and boats for sale or gone already. The historical grounds for catching shellfish, a lot of them are disappeared or disappearing. The boats are having to move further afield, so it's increased diesel costs, or longer working days, or less safe working practices. So they're losing crew, and it's a real bit of a kind of spiral.
If something like this were to happen again, what lessons would you hope have been learned?
Yes, it's a great question, and I hope that the lessons that have been learned are ones of listening to the coastal community and the fishing communities. From day one, they recognised that something wasn't right, something wasn't natural, but it took us months to have combating the theories that were first put to us to finally get somewhere.
That's Jo Redfern, and that's it from us for today. I'm Kaz Graham. The producer is Sally Challoner, and the programme is a BBC Audio Bristol production. Now, what is the weather going to do this week? Here's the Farming Today 5-day forecast from the BBC Weather Centre.